this play will go under review.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at show_DeRosa, Blue Sky Social at joe.derosa.bskysocial. And I appreciate all of you being here because this is a continued season coverage episode as the Bills defeat the Denver Broncos at home to the tune of 31-7, a game that started out uncomfortable and then got pretty damn comfortable after the second half. And we move on to the coveted rematch that Bills fans and Ravens fans have waited for, as the two are going to clash in Orchard Park on Sunday. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous, but I also have some hope that the Bills can pull it out. But we're going to get into that at the end of this episode, back half. We're going to start out by reflecting on this Denver Broncos victory. And to do that, I am joined by my guest. He might work for Trainwreck Sports, but he is the furthest thing from a train wreck. This is Mr. Mike Bundt. Mike, welcome back to the show. I appreciate you being here, man. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, and I wouldn't say so confidently that I'm not a train wreck. Sometimes I am. It just depends on the evening. Hopefully tonight I'll have everything composed, and we'll have a good show ahead of us.
Always a good time when you're on the show, man. I love the conversations we get to have, and we got a good one in store for everybody tonight. It's weird to have like playoff episodes because I feel like the victories in the playoffs are so short-lived at this point because we know where we're at this point in the playoffs. It's the divisional round. It's the hump that the Bills have had an issue getting over the past couple of seasons, and for various reasons. I mean, you could attribute last year's game to, health and kicking deficiencies, the year prior to just an off Josh Allen game, the year prior to that to a complete coaching meltdown, and now this year we hope that they break that trend. But before we get into the weeds of the matchup against the Ravens, Mike, I just want to reflect on the good vibes of this Bills win. Denver coming to town, a top-ranked defense, most sacks in the league, really high EPA against the pass and against the run. And the Bills, for probably I would say pretty much the entire first half, had some success and were moving the ball well on the ground, but kept it close and were draining clock. And then the second half just completely pull away. So let's start this off by me just asking you, Mike, your general thoughts on this Bills win, the things you liked and the things you took note of.
Yeah, I felt really good about this game on Sunday. I was confident going in. I expected the Bills to win. I thought there was a chance they would win comfortably, but it ended up being way more of a margin than I even expected going into the contest. The run game was fantastic. A little bit of a slow start as far as keeping the score close. Obviously, you don't want to start the game by allowing a massive bomb on defense. But from that point forward, I thought the Bills' offense was really good. They were moving the ball. They had 189 yards in the first half. The only problem was they weren't finishing with touchdowns. 3-point game at the half. Felt good as long as they were going to score to open the second half. They settled for another field goal. You're like, is the defense going to be able to keep Bo Nix contained for this entire time? They were able to, and then eventually the passing game opened up, and really at that point, it was game over for the Broncos. And that was really what I thought going in, was that if the Bills were going to be able to score 20+, it was going to be tough for the Broncos to have a chance. I know Bo Nix had a great regular season, but he's a rookie quarterback making his first start in the playoffs on the road against a coach that has been notoriously good at stopping rookie quarterbacks. Denver didn't have a run game. This was a game I expected the Bills to win, and they took care of business.
Absolutely. And just real fast, Spin, be nice. Mike's takes are not a massive train wreck. Mike is a good guy, and we're going to be nice to Mike on this show. Oh my goodness. Appreciate you being here, Spin. But yeah, man, I mean, I did have a little bit of concern with the Bills' red zone effectiveness in this game. Definitely don't underestimate Denver's defense in that situation, especially in a condensed field. And they had success. I mean, I think a big part of it was the strength of their defense in my eyes, which is their pass rush and their interior D-line, disrupting the timing for Josh and the coverage on the back end being sticky enough to kind of throw him off his game a little bit. And you saw 2 straight shots early on in the game where he should have hit Knox for a touchdown and missed it. And then the overthrow to Amari Cooper. And you're thinking, oh man, is this going to be like a bit of a nervous Josh game, or we can get a skittish performance? But I feel like the playoffs are a high energy thing. And for a quarterback, it's about just getting reps and calming down as the game progresses. And I think that happened with Josh. I mean, when you go back and watch him, even just on tape, it was like not a tale of two halves, because I don't think it was that dramatically different, but it felt like a more calm, poised effect. And once they were able to throw the ball because of the defense kind of selling out for the Bills rushing attack, that's when you started seeing Josh lock in and some better throws happening. And it was a lot of fun. But let's get a little bit more into this matchup specifically and just talk about like Josh Allen, because I know you gave it briefly, but I think his wild card numbers speak for themselves at this point, but it seems like this is just his round where he dominates. I mean, I can think of a few really clutch throws down the field to Dawson Knox was another one. I mean, there was so much in this game to be, I guess, if you're a Bills fan, fond of when you talk about Josh Allen's playoff performance, and another game to add to his belt. So, I mean, what were the things you saw, Mike, that you really liked, maybe didn't like, things that might make you optimistic for this game against Baltimore, and things that might make you a little iffy?
Yeah, I would say the 2 words that come to mind when I think of Josh Allen's performance on Sunday were efficient and effective. Early on, efficient. Wasn't really lighting it up. Bills were running the ball well. They were sticking with it. Now, I know when you're playing a much inferior opponent, that's not really the strategy many fans want to see. But I do believe the run game in the first half opened things up for the Bills pass game in the second half. One thing that Eric has talked about on Cover One this year is that the Bills have faced one of the highest rates of stacked boxes when they're on offense. And that's something that's quite the opposite of what the Bills offense was facing years ago when they had Dable and Dorsey. And a big reason why is the Bills' commitment to the run. And the Broncos, they have an amazing pass rush. They're able to get to the quarterback, and they have just a great defense overall. So I think the Bills' commitment to running the ball in the first half and having effectiveness with it really made the Broncos take their run game a little bit more seriously. And I think that's when it gave time for Josh to really calm down and relax and find his game. Because I do think early on, he was not jittery. He was efficient in the first half, even when things were a little bit off. But he was not his normal top-of-the-line self, at least early on in the game. You mentioned the Knox miss. There were a few throws that were a little bit off. You could see him bouncing around a little bit in the pocket, feeling a little bit of the pressure at times. But in the second half, he was automatic, just unstoppable. I know the play to messing Curtis Samuel was wide open on it, but still a great play to get Samuel the ball. And then obviously the play to Ty Johnson. That plays slow motion to me in the stadium. The whole time you're like, what's going on? It's 4th and 1. You just need a yard. You just need a yard. And once he started to go back to throw it, I knew where he was going, and I couldn't believe that was Ty Johnson. Ty Johnson might be one of the best receiving backs in the league with some of these plays that he makes over the course of the season. But, I felt that Josh, once he got his composure, really took off. And at that point, Denver had no answers for him. 20 for 26 for 272 and 2 touchdowns against that defense. That's insane.
Yeah, number 1 in EPA per play in the league. And that's great points, because that nervous energy comment that you kept hearing Tony Romo say at least one of 100 times in that game, it felt like it was real for Josh. And that's something that's a bit uncharacteristic, because usually in that first round of the playoffs, that's when he seems like the most composed, and you can kind of see that dialed in nature. And I was happy that it did kind of turn into that as the game went on. But what you brought up about the rushing attack is a point I want to bring up just in general about this offense, because to me, when you're going up against a line that's as good as Denver's, with, the athleticism they have, the physicality play with, and just the numbers speaking for themselves and how good they are at defending the run, And the fact that this offensive line and rushing combo with James Cook, Ty Johnson, at times Ray Davis, was really able to control the game. And, I mentioned before that the first half was low scoring, but the Bills dominated time of possession and were just really taking the game into their favor with that. I think that was such a key component and such a reassuring thing when you talk about this offense into the rest of the playoffs, especially for Josh Allen, because kind of the thing that you want this Bills offense to have happen to them is a defense that just completely sells out to stop your running, especially on early downs. Because now, if you're just seeing the fact that the box is stacked a bit more often, that they're coming down to space, that they're trying to really show you, hey, we can't let you keep getting favorable downs, second and third down. Now we know we're opening things up, and that one play action fake that we're going to run is going to be so much more effective. And that's exactly what you saw, especially with some of those PA shots to like Dawson Knox. And then just other conventional non-play action passing to like those third down conversions to Samuel, the deep shot to Samuel, a couple of the quick hitters to like Shakir. I saw one to Coleman. It was cool to just see that on display. And that's what makes this Bills offense so potent, but also kind of the summary of the whole year for Josh Allen, what makes him so potent, because you got a guy that once he knows he has the efficiency in front of him to be able to move the ball without needing him to do it consistently, rather we're getting it done on the ground and we're making a statement because our line is blocking its ass off. That probably breeds so much comfort into his mental state as a quarterback in a game. And that seems to be what happened here. We can run the ball against the slide. We can do it consistently. Now we know all of a sudden that they're fearing this run, and I can throw the ball and I know I'm going to have the field open up for me. And then the yak ability was on display again from guys like Shakir and Samuel, but that throw and Samuel just kind of getting out of PS2's path and being able to take it, those are things that I think are going to make Josh Allen even better as the playoffs go on. And when we get into the weeds of this Ravens matchup, again, something that they're going to have to emphasize because it's going to be tough. But yeah, Mike, great points. Do you have any more thoughts on Josh Allen specifically before we move on to our next topic?
Yeah, he's just been Superman this year. He's been unbelievable for this Bills team. And it's ironic that in the year where his stats are probably the lowest they've been since prior to 2020, he's had the highest value I think he's ever had to his time in Buffalo, just by protecting the ball, making the smart play, and just being effective, getting it to his playmakers and letting them do the rest of the work. And I would make an argument too that it is more important than ever before for this Bills team to have an effective run game, because if you just look at this Bills offense, what is their weakness? What is probably the lowest overall talent portion of this Bills offense? You would have to say the receivers. They're not the best separators in the world. So without a good run game, without that threat of running the ball, teams can play the pass. What are you going to do? You're going to struggle to throw the ball. So it's almost paramount for the Bills to be able to show teams early on in games that they can run it. Because you know what? If they want to stick to just trying to stop Josh Allen in the pass, you know what? We'll just continue to run the ball. You know what? We're okay. We're perfectly okay just having a ground and pound. But that ground and pound is why the Bills also now have the ability with this wide receiver group to still go off, even though they don't have a Stephon Diggs or the top end talent that they've had in recent years.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And that's how you aid to a really, I mean, as far as in structure separation, that's how you aid to that problem, is just if we know we can run the ball and there's still a formidable way to move it, then all of a sudden, like I talked about before, the threat of play action will create the separation if we're able to get a defense sleeping or catch them off guard or get them to hesitate even a second. And that's just such a big thing, especially in the playoffs. And getting a little more into that, because one of the things we saw in years past with this Bills offense was them kind of getting stymied, especially when they were such a heavy, explosive downfield passing unit, is now that they can run the ball effectively, it feels like a more sustainable approach to playoff football, because so many of these teams in so many years past are capable of running. You even saw it in the Super Bowl last year with the San Francisco team that predicates themselves, their entire scheme, on how effective they are at multiple looks with running the ball, and Kansas City, who does the same thing. Buffalo has that now, and they have the personnel to match it. And it's why, even though I do have worries about this receiving core, I feel like the way to offset the deficiency is an approach that you can take and still have success with, versus vice versa, where if your passing attack is shut down and you can't run the ball, you're not doing anything, or at the very least, you're going to struggle to do anything. And it puts infinitely more pressure on Josh Allen. And that was on full display a couple years ago when they played the Bengals in that playoff game, even though they had their opportunities. And I think now I feel a little more comfortable with that approach, even though you are going up against a very good defense in Baltimore. But one other thing I wanted to bring up about this game, Mike, before we get into our, most impactful players, was just the penalties. And you could argue some were fair, some weren't fair, but it seems like a recurring theme with this Bills team that penalties are making drives a little more difficult. And you have Josh Allen, and Josh Allen's extended playability can keep drive alive. But when you talk about good teams like Baltimore, potentially like Kansas City or Houston, that is a problem, because you cannot play from behind the sticks against those teams. So I'm curious about your opinion on the penalties and really just how much of an issue you think it is, if it's one big to you or not.
Yeah, I'm not too worried overall about the penalties. Yeah, they take some bad ones in bad moments. That's never a good thing. They're able to overcome them a lot of the time because they have such skill on the offensive side of the ball with Josh Allen that they can really do. They can kind of get past them in a lot of ways. But yeah, you never want to take dumb penalties in bad moments. I will say, when you start relying more on running the ball, that the penalties are going to hurt you more when you get a holding, when you get a false start, because you can't make up that yardage as easily. But I do like your point about this offense being branded more for the postseason. I do think that in the past, what Brian Dable did, what Ken Dorsey did, wasn't really the way to win games in January. And you'd hear people on the radio, Jeremy White, some of the other guys on GR, and I think they're smart guys. I like their opinions, but you'd hear them say, just continue, throw, pass the ball. That's modern day football. Yeah, that might be modern day football in September, October, but once you get some 25-mile-per-hour wind gusts and precipitation, you're playing 10 degrees. It's not so easy to not just throw the ball, but catch the ball and have your timing and everything else, especially against some of the best defenses in the league. And as you and I both know, in the postseason, sometimes certain officiating crews call the game differently. They let you tug a little bit more. They let you grab a little bit more. Well, what does that do? That might lead to an interception if they don't call a flag on an obvious holding call. That might lead to incompletions in big moments. And I think what we saw in the past, the Bills' offense was a little bit too finesse, a little bit too reliant on their passing game. They didn't have answers. And people would always point to guys like Devin Singletary and be like, but he averages 4.5 yards per carry, 5 yards a carry, whatever it was, against light boxes. I mean, when teams realize that they can't throw it and then they go a little bit more men in the box, then the run game disappeared. I think this offense is well-rounded enough to really attack teams in a variety of different ways. I love the offensive line right now. You got 2 tackles on both sides that are taking care of business. Josh is getting a clean pocket. And while I don't think any of the skill weapons are really high-end on the receiving core, I think they're all good enough in their defined roles to where you can have success. And James Cook, if he isn't already a superstar, he's close to being one. I said it at the end of last year. There's 2 superstars on this Bills team right now. Josh Allen, James Cook. And I know some people will say Deion Dawkins and other random names. Superstar means you're one of the best in the NFL at your position and you're a recognizable name. James Cook is right up there now with Josh Allen. He might not be a Saquon. He might not be a Christian McCaffrey. When you get close to 20 touchdowns in an NFL regular season, you're a superstar.
I think Deion Dawkins would fit the superstar category, though. I think he's a well-known enough name, especially from some of the more, like, if you talk about some of the higher tier writers and analysts that are covering football in depth and aren't just spouting nonsense on Twitter, his name comes up pretty often. He had some All-Pro votes. I
don't think he's been consistently a top 3 to 4 left tackle in the game. If you'd say over the last 3-4 years, most people would say he's that 5 to like 8 left tackle. Really good, consistent Pro Bowler. I think, like, to be a superstar, you have to be the best of the best. I think Deion might be close to that, but I don't think your average fan in Houston or your fan in Green Bay or your fan in Las Vegas is associating Deion Dawkins for being one of the best tackles in football. And that's not his fault. I just don't think that he is up there. While if you talk to any fan across the country, they know that Josh Allen is up there with Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. And I think if you talk to enough football fans across the country now, while they wouldn't say that James Cook is a Derrick Henry or a Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley, they would tell you, you got a 1,000-yard back who averages 5 yards a carry, who had near 20 touchdowns. Really, the only thing holding James Cook back from putting up the crazy stats is that the Bills don't run the ball more with him than what some of these other teams do.
Understandable. I'm gonna disagree on the Dawkins point still, but I do get it, and I do think he's like on the cusp of that real upper echelon, and maybe one more year at his current state gets him to that point.
He's close.
But I feel like even the marketing component of Dawkins still gets him there, because he's been in some national media commercials. He's been at the NFL awards multiple times. He's a recognizable face and name, especially with all the shit talk he had about the Jets that kind of got him viral too. So the point I want to get to that you brought up too, that I love about the penalty conversation, where I stand on it is I have concerns, but I also kind of understand that with certain things, this is the nature of the game of a physical offensive line. Like, you are going to get yourself in situations where a ref might not be as savvy or might not be as, I guess if you want to call it, respective of the fact that you are a physical team, and more likely to call holds, more likely to see you use your hands and throw the flag. And it's more of the discipline penalties, like the false starts and stuff, or maybe like some of the ways that they block on the perimeter, that I'm like, we don't really need to be doing this to, be effective. But I think it can be cleaned up. And even if it's not a backbreaking thing, but you did bring up that the running game and how much those penalties affect that. If you're starting a drive and you get a good run that gets called back because of a holding penalty, and you're on 1st and 20 against the Ravens defense, again, that's just not a world you can live in. That's a defense that is opportunistic with great coverage on the back end, a very good defensive line. You can't put yourself in situations where you're playing from behind. It's just not going to be sustainable. It's not going to lend itself to your strengths on offense, which is a scheme that predicates on being an effective run game that you can work out of in multiple looks and pass out of multiple looks. You don't get that flexibility when you fall behind. So I do think it does have to be cleaned up, but do I think it's going to go away? No. They're going to have their holds. They're going to have their false starts. I would love to be wrong on that, but I feel like with how physical the playoffs get, how intense this matchup is going to be on both sides, especially in the trenches, it's something that I'm prepared for, but I would love to see change, because I think if you are able to just avoid it, it's going to lend wonders to your offense in a game where you need them to be basically perfect to keep up with this Ravens offense that is just such a formidable threat for your defense. But I want to get over into our most impactful players on offense and defense, Mike. But before we do, guys, if you're here, just joining us, appreciate all of you tuning into this episode. Feel free to drop a like on this video. If you're enjoying the conversation, share it with your friends. If you think that you have a Bills fan in your life that wants to check out our content or would love our content, let's move on. Offense. I have a few names here, Mike, but I'm curious who you have on the most impactful players, not named Josh Allen, on offense.
Well, you just took away the most obvious one, Joe. I'll say the most impactful player on the Bills offense. I just talked about him. It's James Cook. To me, he's the number 2 player on this offense I think of behind Josh Allen, because at wide receiver, they could go to any of these players on any given game. I feel that you could have an Amari Cooper game where he suddenly goes off for 6 catches for 85 yards. Is it odd that they haven't really utilized him much in this offense? Maybe a little bit. I'm high on Khalil Shakir. He's been fantastic all season. He has been consistent. I expect him to contribute. What I find really interesting this past playoff game, though, was the contributions from Curtis Samuel and Dalton Kincaid. Not to say that they might have held back on them, but the Bills knew that they always had Curtis Samuel and that ready to go if they wanted to utilize him a little bit more. And I do find it a little interesting that come in the playoff game, they let him loose and he makes a big play and he shows out. I think Curtis Samuel might be more involved in these playoff plans for the Bills. Maybe something that they saved a little bit and now they're ready to unleash. Dalton Kincaid gets a deep ball. I thought that was a good sign. I could name so many different players on this team, but that's part of what the Everyone Eats is all about. You can have anybody step up in any given moment, any given down, any given play. And so with your question being said, naming one guy it has to be James Cook, just because he's been the touchdown machine. I really think he's the reason why the Bills offense has gone from being really good, like top 5 good, to being 1 or 2 in the league. Because how many times have you seen him break loose for a 30-plus, 40-plus yard touchdown this year? James Cook is the ultimate playmaker for this Bills offense because he has the ability to do what no Bills running back has been able to do since maybe LaShawn McCoy, and that is take it to the house from a good-sized distance on any given play. If you give him that lane, he has the speed to break it loose. Devin Singletary, love him. He didn't have that ability. Zach Moss didn't have that ability. James Cook, he is someone that he's basically your lone player that isn't in the passing game that has the ability to take it to the house anytime he touches the ball.
Yeah. So I brought this question up from Spin because I think this is a good segue into it, because James Cook was my most impactful player too, if we're talking just one. I could go down a list, I will in a second, but first off, this question, which is question, exclamation points, is James Cook a dynamic running back? I would deem him so. I think it also depends on what your definition of dynamic is relative to a player in the NFL. But if you're talking the ability to run, the ability to catch passes out of the backfield or over the middle, I think James Cook is, and I think it's more than, acceptable to have that take. I would say the only thing with James Cook this year is I feel like, even though it's funny, I had a prediction, Mike. I think you might have been on the show where I said I think James Cook is going to finish top 3 in receptions on the Bills team, and he did. Granted, everyone was sitting with similar counts, so it's not exactly the biggest flex, but it still felt like the utilization of him as a pass catcher wasn't enough. I thought we were going to, you know what I mean? Even though he has the number, I feel like he was poised to just be a complete two-way back where he's always catching passes out of the backfield, and you have him in almost like an Austin Eckler role like the Chargers did a couple years ago. But I would still consider him, just from a skill standpoint, a dynamic back. So thank you for that question.
And don't you think more of that? It's not really that James Cook can't do it. It's that they realize, Ty Johnson, you're really damn good at doing this. We're going to use you in the pass game. Ray Davis was good in the pass game. And it's almost like, well, we have to take James Cook off the field sometimes to give him a breather. And he's been so good at running the ball that they kind of just made that more of a defined role. While maybe last year, when there was more uncertainty behind him in the backfield, he had to carry more of that load. And maybe that is why he's exploding for bigger plays and gashing defenses, because he is more set in what he's doing out of the Bills' backfield.
Yeah, and also I think, and I've talked about this a few times over the past couple episodes, but James Cook just has developed as a runner too. He's been getting better each and every year, but more so at his most this season. He's the most physical we've ever seen him. His vision is good, but the way he's able to drive a pile now is something I didn't think he'd be able to do when he came into the league. I thought it was going to be more of hey, we couldn't get J.D. McKissick, so let's draft one and make him that. But he's really emerged as a pure runner. So maybe it's the idea that because we have Ty Johnson, who pass blocks well and runs well, that his threat of being a receiver is just more potent at the moment, and we want to keep Cook to a defined, not really a bell cow, but primary back role. And I'm totally cool with it. But Mike, I wanted to list a couple more, and you briefly mentioned Ty Johnson, Curtis Samuel, who I'm so happy that Curtis Samuel's 2 biggest moments came in the 2 biggest games for the Bills, pretty much. He goes through turf toe in the summertime and everyone's kind of out on him early on in the year. He's not really doing much. And then he has the Chiefs game where he just kind of goes off for no reason, not no reason, but you know what I mean? He just emerges. And then in this game where he comes through, and I'm excited to see what a Curtis Samuel ramp up looks like in a playoff run for the Bills, because you saw, even though he only sat at about 34% of the total offensive snaps, there were times where they were using Curtis Samuel as a motion piece and using him to kind of use it as a check, but also on a free release. And I think the speed he has, if you talk about a team that's going to try and man you up, which I know Baltimore will try to do at times, that could be a useful weapon to try and create some separation if there's concern about it in structure approach. So I'm excited to see what that looks like with him. And I'm happy he had a big play in a good game against Denver, which is a tough defense to do so against. But, I had a note here that just says O-line, because it's the entire line. I mean, there were some blemishes. I know David Edwards had that whiff on Zach Allen, but for the most part, the O-line balled out, especially in run blocking. And that's just something that, again, for this Bills offense in the playoffs, that's a world you want to live in, because if you're able to push that defensive line around a little bit, you could do it against anybody. I'm not saying it will happen, but they have the capability to enforce their will and to be physical on these teams. And when you're in these crucial games, controlling the clock, controlling the line of scrimmage, setting that physical tone, that changes everything for you. It changes how your team plays. It changes the mentality you go into each drive with. You feel like you're on top of the world and that you're not going to get beat. And if they can do this against Baltimore, there you go. That's what you need against such a team that, did the same thing to you back in week 4, and you don't want to see history repeat itself. So I'm pleased with that. I brought up Dawson Knox because I think Dawson Knox, especially in these playoffs, man, he's their primary tight end right now. That's not shade at Dalton Kincaid. I think Dalton Kincaid as a receiving tight end right now is still really freaking good. Even though he didn't technically catch that ball, he's still in the history books, will go down as having a reception. So it's okay. Let's just pretend he didn't totally drop that at the bottom. But Dawson Knox to me has just become, everything you want him to be. And I understand, again, all the flack he's gotten, all the criticism, whatever. He's been extremely effective, and they know that he's been effective, and they're using him on these crucial third down situations. They're using him in play action with certain tight end looks. They're using him as a primary blocking tight end in the run looks, which is so imperative to how they function. Dawson Knox's role in this offense, even if people might not think it's the biggest, is massive. And having him on the field in this upcoming game will be even more massive, and it showed even in the few receptions he got in this game against Denver, because having him on the field and the multiplicity you have now to be able to run with him or leak him out for a route against a linebacker, it's something that this Bills offense definitely takes advantage of. And it's something that I think they're going to need to use in this upcoming matchup. And that's someone I wanted to highlight. But Mike, defense. Who you got? Any significant names you want to bring up? Anyone that, because it did feel like there was a true standout, but like there's a couple names I want to mention.
Yeah, so this Bills defense is interesting because there's really not flashiness to it as far as individual performers. You could go with the standard names. Matt Milano, he looked a lot better against the Broncos, had a sack. He made his presence known, was one of the highest graded players on the Bills defense, according to PFF. We all love the PFF grades here at Cover One. No sarcasm at all. But I'd say Milano was a standout to me in this game, and they'll need him to be a standout against the Ravens if they want to have a chance at containing Lamar. How about Von Miller a little bit? I know he isn't the player he once was, but we have seen him get to the quarterback. There was an impressive spin move where he got right in Bo Nix's face, forced him to roll out. But I would say those are probably the two guys I would start with. Milano, because I think he's going to be paramount, and then Von, because I think he has enough juice in the tank to come up with a big play at a big time. I don't expect Von to be all over the field throughout a game from start to finish, but if he can make a sack on a third down with the Bills up 3 in the fourth quarter, or to stop an important drive and hold the Ravens to a field goal to get the ball back to Buffalo to go on a drive to try to take the lead. Those are the things I'm looking for. But definitely starts with Milano, especially since Bernard and Dorian Williams both have been solid this year, but I don't think we really have gotten that splash, that big leap from Bernard that many fans were hoping for. So if you are going to control the Ravens offense, if you are going to stop Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, you're going to need your linebackers to really step up. And I guess the last obvious name, Taron Johnson. Nickel, going up against the Ravens power run game, their ability to mix power with speed to the outside. Taron's going to have himself a day in order for the Bills to have a chance against Baltimore. I know some people were talking 4-3. I've talked 4-3. Maybe you get Dorian Williams in there more. Eric was right. They're not going to take Taron Johnson off the field. So you're going to need him to really step up to the occasion.
Yeah. Taron Johnson's one I'll highlight. He had a couple really nice reps in run defense. He wasn't tested too much in pass defense, but the Broncos offense didn't really, if you watch it, there's so many times where Bo Nix had a look or had something open and either didn't take it or just skipped a pass. So it's so hard to evaluate pass coverage in this game because it's like, if it was anything, it was like a hole in the zone that Cortland Sutton found, or it was just like a screen or a boot or something. Like, that's why for me, there isn't any corner on my list for this episode. It's literally just because I watched Bo Nix like have a wide open receiver and the ball didn't even make it to him. It got to his feet. And I made a joke at work today that this kind of reminds me of Mac Jones. And I think Bo Nix could be better than Mac Jones. I'm not saying they're the same player, but like when you talk about the lack of arm strength, like Bo Nix threw that deep pass, but there's something about his sideline to sideline passing that I think needs refinement and work. And in this game, it was on display. So sorry, I just had to go on that tangent because there were a couple passes where I'm like, Bo, like, please, for the love of God, like step into the throw. Like you don't have the Josh Allen arm, man. Like he's like skipping it and his platform's off and he kind of sidearms it. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? The pocket's clean. Please reset. But and that's not to dig at him too much because I think, you know, that first throw is really good. A lot of respect to Bo, and I think he'll develop in this league. I'm hoping he's not Mac Jones because, you know, that means he doesn't have a long career set out. But my defensive MVPs outside of Tara Johnson really stem from how I was looking at this, who I think made the most immediate impact, who was really helping keep the defense in line. And the two names I came up with were one, Terrell Bernard. And I think Terrell Bernard, again, calling plays out at the line of scrimmage. There were multiple reps from him in run defense where I think he was in the right position, met a running back at the gap. Even if he didn't make the immediate stop, he at least slowed it down enough to create a negative play, or at the very least prevent it from becoming anything more explosive. And, you know, the diagnosis that he can have at the line of scrimmage, his processing as a linebacker, those are traits that are just simply what make him such a good player in my eyes. And it was shown, especially in some of the plays. Like there was a screen I think they tried running that he completely blew up on his own. He runs right around the formation. He goes through two individual blockers and just threw him down. And I was like, man, Bernard's on one. When you get him right and he's in position, he's great. But you mentioned it, Mike. That's it. It's Von Miller. I wanted to say Von Miller. There is this thought from a certain section of the fan base still that Von Miller's washed because he's not registering sacks. I promise you, if you watch Von Miller, especially with the ramp up in the snap count he had in this game, he's there, man. That Von Miller that you know, the pass rush extraordinaire, and even in run defense, he's there. He's present. He's making impact. He has pressures, and he's not wrapping up. I get it. And there's concerns about him laterally where maybe he gets pushed or skewed out of the way a smidge and he doesn't have the same explosiveness to get back inside that he once did. And those are real things. The man is 35 years old. I saw a rep where they dropped him back into coverage. I laughed. Why the hell is that a thing? But for some reason, Bobby Babbage was on one going sicko mode and decided to drop Von Miller into coverage. It's funny. But Von Miller is effective as a pass rusher still. The hands are still there. The strength is still there. The push is still there. And I feel like last year sucked. It sucked. He was coming back from an ACL tear. It took forever for him to get right, and it tainted the memory of Von Miller in Buffalo. But I promise you this year, as he's gotten more and more game action, he has been good. Was he 2022 Von? No, but he's good, and he's getting pressure, and I think that's just paramount, especially as you go further into the playoffs and you need someone who is able to collapse that side of the pocket, create a threat, flush, you know, Lamar Jackson, potentially one of Mahomes or Stroud out of their spot and be able to create havoc, which is what this Bills defense does well. He's a big part of it. The uptick in snap count is really important to me because I feel like now they're depending on Von to go off in the playoffs, and all those theories about him being kind of stashed to be a higher count in the playoffs, to be a factor in the playoffs, are real because we're seeing it on display. I think 50% might be a start. I think it could be even higher this week. I think it just depends on how you want to attack this Ravens offense. Maybe they don't end up in a lot of true pass rush situations where it's third and long. Maybe they do. We're going to see, but I think Von was effective in both ends, and I think it's time to stop thinking that he's washed because he's not. He's not washed. Is he not the same? Yes, but calling him washed would imply he doesn't do anything, and that's just not true. Last year, sure. This year, no. Von Miller was good in this game. No sacks registered, but he created pressure and directly affected Bo Nix's vision and a few of his pocket maneuvering situations just by his pressure alone. So I'm giving Von Miller his flowers for this game. I know Rousseau and technically Milano had a sack. Rousseau's sack was hilarious, by the way. Like at the end of that game, Bo Nix just had a full-on panic attack on the field, and Rousseau just walked up to him. It was great. But listen, Von Miller's still good. Let's not do this thing where we pretend he's not. He's still very effective.
I mean,
So,
he
Mike,
had
any
6
more thoughts
sacks
on
this
that?
year, and he missed 4 games. If he played the full season, he would have probably had around 8 sacks. Like, that's not a bad. That's really not bad considering how limited he plays. He has had a solid season. His PFF grade does reflect it, and I do think that there was a little bit something to keeping him healthy and stashing him for the playoffs. That was the whole reason they brought him on in the first place, was to try to win a Super Bowl. In the first year, he did great in the first 2.5 months before tearing his ACL. But if you don't have him, it doesn't really help when you need him. So I do think Von has been impactful, and we'll see if he can have a big game here against Lamar, because they'll need him to. And honestly, defensive end is probably going to be the defensive end and linebacker are going to be the 2 biggest positions in this game, just because you're going to want to keep Lamar in that pocket. And as Eric's one video came out, you're going to need your linebackers to have proper leverage to do so as well. So that is going to be the tricky part, because you have Derrick Henry who can run up the middle at any given time. So can Von give us a Von Miller playoff moment? Would definitely help the Bills' chances.
I would love it. And let's pivot over now, just on that note, to this matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. And listen, we've wanted this. After that week 4 game, it was ugly. They got blown out. There were injuries that definitely affected the course of their defense in that game. And we were sitting there saying, what would it look like if they were healthy? Well, here we are. This is what it's going to look like when they're healthy. And it's still a mismatch. Let's just call it what it is. This Ravens team is physical. They have the size. They have a stellar blocking scheme. Tom Monken has Lamar playing the best ball of his career. Lamar has transformed himself. Not that I liked him as a passer in years past, but I think he's just at his absolute best. He is absolutely dialed in. He is playing outstanding ball. I know people don't like hearing this, but I really do think he has just as much of a case for the MVP this year. And with him, you now have Derrick Henry, who, even though the Bills have been capable of shutting him down and defending him in the past, he has broken off for explosive plays, and you saw it in week 4. This is a matchup where I could see several things becoming the most, in my eyes, the most impactful. But Mike, I'm going to turn it to you first and ask you what you're looking out for in this Bills versus Ravens matchup.
So my first thing I'm looking out for is, can the Bills contain Lamar Jackson? I know everybody right now is saying you need to stop Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is the key to this offense. No, you got to stop Lamar first and foremost. Because my opinion on this is Derrick Henry is either going to get his yards or he isn't. We've seen the Bills against Derrick Henry in the past. They've had some performances where they contain him and they do a pretty solid job. And then they have other performances where they get eaten up. But Lamar has the ability to just destroy you in a game. And if he starts opening them up with runs to the outside, and then he's going to have wide receivers open throughout the game, then Derrick Henry is unstoppable at that point. Because if you can't stop Lamar, Derrick Henry, what are you going to do? You have no answer for Derrick Henry. While I think if you go all out to stop Derrick Henry, Lamar's still going to feast on you. So my number one key is you gotta find a way to contain Lamar Jackson. You need your DNs to be on the top of their game. They need to keep him in the pocket. You can't be cheating. You can't be gumming inside trying to stop Derrick Henry all the time and then letting Lamar get to the outside. That's what they did against Pittsburgh. The entire first drive of the game, just Lamar keeping it, getting outside the defensive ends, running for 7, 8, 9, 10 yards at a time. And you're going to get cooked that way. They're going to get a first down every 3rd and 3 if you think they're going to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry, because Lamar will keep it himself and he will cook you. And so I think the Bills need their DNs to have the game of their lives. They need their linebackers to be as disciplined as they've ever been. And it's hard because, let's be real, how do you take down a beast like Derrick Henry? You need to be physical. You need to be able to face him man-to-man. And he is more physical than most players out there on a football field. It's going to be cold out, and he's going to run over you. So it's part of the reason why the Ravens offense is so difficult to go up against. You add in the fact that Lamar now is passing at the best level of his career, and he has weapons in the receiving game with Bateman, with Andrews, and we'll find out about Zay Flowers. He has guys he can get the ball in their hands, and they're going to do something with it after the play. So to me, Baltimore is the most dangerous offense in the NFL. They might not have scored the most points in the league this year, but they are the most dangerous offense in the league because of their combination of speed, power, athleticism, and being able to do things that other teams in the league just can't. It's kind of similar to how teams go up against the Buffalo Bills. When you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, and he's a freak who can run, but also has a rocket arm, and you add in some mobility and agility and elusiveness, how do you take him down? You just can't, because you're not used to going up against that. You're not facing quarterbacks that run a 4-4 or 4-3 or whatever Lamar runs ever. So you can't prepare for that speed. So you just kind of, you either bring it or you don't. And most of the time, teams don't. And so that leads me to one thing. What's going to be the key to this game besides the Bills defense hoping to contain Lamar? You just need the Bills offense to take care of business like they have been. No more punting it on 4th and 1 from the 45-yard line or whatever yard line you're on, whether that's your 45 or their 45. You're going to need points. Points are at a premium. Early on, maybe you can still play slightly conservative, but as the game goes on, you're going to need to be aggressive. You're going to need to convert, and you're going to need to be on top of things. Otherwise, it's going to be tough to win against a team like Baltimore, because while the Bills had one less loss than Baltimore, I feel like some of the Ravens' losses are on the flukish side. When you lose to a team like the Raiders, you blow a game late, you lose a game to the Browns. I think you can attribute a little bit of that to the Ravens playing down to some teams. And when the Ravens play at their ceiling, they're the only other team in the NFL that I think matches up with the Bills toe-to-toe. I think the Lions are amazing. I think the Chiefs are amazing. But I think the Ravens are the only other team in the league that can toe-for-toe go with the Bills' offense. And that's because I think Lamar and Josh Allen are essentially equals at quarterback. And I don't think that Detroit has that with Jared Goff. And I don't think Kansas City right now has the well-rounded enough approach on offense to also go toe-to-toe at this moment. Not saying that Mahomes isn't on the level of Allen and Lamar. He obviously is, and even surpassed, he's much further than them. But I think at this moment, these are the top two offenses in all of football.
Definitely. The Ravens offense is going to get theirs. Let's call it what it is right now. They're going to get theirs. Derrick Henry's going to rush his yards. He's going to have an explosive play. This is what Derrick Henry does. You just have to tip your cap to the fact that they're good at doing it. It's virtually impossible to stop when you have a running back like Derrick Henry, the physicality he brings, the size he has, and how insanely fundamentally difficult it is to tackle him when he has acceleration. He's going to get his. So you have to, in my eyes, control this game by keeping them out of the end zone, and that's it. That's it. I can live in a world where the Ravens are driving, but they're only kicking field goals. The same way the Denver Broncos were probably totally fine living that world against the Bills. You cannot let them get those explosive plays off, but if you do and it's not for a touchdown, keeping them out of the end zone is paramount. The problem is when you get to the red zone, they're just effective because of the misdirection, because of the fact that that Derrick Henry can drive it in if he's at the 1 yard line. They're a threat no matter what, so you have to keep them from getting to those positions and getting too far down to a point where maybe this game could be won by you if you put it on the back of Justin Tucker, who has struggled in Orchard Park and is going to be playing in cold weather in a down year for him. It's that, to me, is probably the biggest thing to watch out for, is if you are forcing them into field goal situations and how aggressive they decide to be because of it and how effective Justin Tucker is, and you bring up contain. That's one of my notes on defense. Do not lose contain on Lamar, on Derrick Henry, on Justice Hill, two who burned the Bills several times in their last matchup. That is the biggest thing for me as far as being able to keep the Ravens rushing attack a bit more one-dimensional. That doesn't mean it won't work. It just means that if you are able to take away their threat on the edges, outside runs from Derrick Henry and Justice Hill, Lamar holding and being able to create a lane and get the leverage to get an outside run, if you can effectively seal that off, that does help you a little bit because now you know that that threat of the outside is gone. Everything funnels through the middle, and we can maybe stack the box a bit more. And even if we don't have the size, we can get the position to slow you down, and that's what we're aiming for. But this is a Ravens offense that just fundamentally matches up so well for the so well against the Buffalo Bills. The size they bring, the physicality they have, it's going to be hard to stop them. So you got to stop them in the key moments. You got to try and force turnovers, and you got to try and keep them out of the end zone. As simple as that sounds, that's where you can live and die if they're not generating touchdowns, but rather 3 instead of 6 to 7. But there's one I want to point out that I think is really, really key here. And it's something that gets overlooked because Baltimore's defense is exceptional. They've really picked things up in the second half of the year. But the one metric that I was looking for this Ravens defense as a potential exploit is how they match up against tight ends. Right now, they are currently 21st in DVOA against primary tight ends, and they're 18th in play action defense against tight ends. Two things that you know the Buffalo Bills offense will prepare to bring in this matchup using Dawson Knox, like I alluded to before. To me, Knox, Kincaid, 12 personnel, heavy sets that might feature both and Alec Anderson to get them to run. That's how you can win this game and control this game on offense. That is where I think they need to be effective in, because if you are able to exploit the matchup of Dawson Knox or even Dalton Kincaid in those looks against linebackers that maybe just simply can't keep up or cover, I think you have a really good chance of maintaining control, putting up the points, and being able to take this Ravens team out of game script. I'm not saying that you can't get yours with your receivers. I'm not saying that you have to do this every single play, but it's an exploit for this Ravens defense that are really, really just, again, the defensive line is so good. I'm not even doubting their linebackers. Their linebackers can cover and they can rush. I love Trenton Simpson coming out of the draft. I actually have to see if he's healthy, but it's just one of those things where this team has very few weaknesses, but this is one exploit that I think you can attack. And if you could do it effectively, it might change the dynamic of how their passing attack looks at your offense and create some lanes for guys like Curtis Samuel and the pre-snap motion looks that the Bills will use to try and get him going with some extra velocity. That could actually be a difference maker and get you more opportunities when there's something to exploit. And that's what I'm really watching out for on offense, apart from, again, Mike, just dictating at the line of scrimmage, being able to move around this Ravens D-line. It was bad in the first game, but towards the second half, they were running a bit more effectively before the trick play. James Cook had multiple runs of productive yards per carry, and I think that they can run on this Ravens defense. It's a matter of imposing your will, and being able to do it against a really good D-line is a tall task, but something that, again, the physicality of this Buffalo Bills offensive line, I think, can do it against anybody on a good day, and they're going to be motivated, and I'm hoping to see it. So that's really the biggest thing for me. And I guess on defense, the only thing I had remaining was first down. First down to me is paramount, Mike, and I'll turn this back over to you after I make this final point. The Ravens are going to eat you alive if you are giving up chunk plays on first down. You got to call it what it is. If Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and Justice Hill and potentially Zay Flowers, but if not Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Pat Ricard, if these men have a 2nd and 3, they will do whatever they want to you. They will let the RPO dictate whatever it is they want to dictate, and they will take full advantage of a defense on its heels. First down defense is paramount to stopping the Ravens. If you can create havoc like you've been able to do during the year and be able to meet Derrick Henry in the backfield and prevent explosive gains on first down and put these Ravens in a 2nd and 9, a 2nd and 13, a 3rd and 8, a 3rd and 9. I am not saying that you are getting off the field. I am not saying it's a guarantee. This is a great offense you are going up against, an elite offense, but the position you are in is better. It's better for you. It's going to lead you to have more opportunity to control this game, to put more pressure on this team, to generate mistakes. There's a lot at stake for this Baltimore Ravens team, too, coming into Buffalo in hostile territory. Getting the crowd behind you, getting loud, getting them into a spot where they can have a pre-snap penalty, getting them into a spot where the rushing attack, at least on script, won't be as big of a factor and can be contained. That's where you got to live in. But to me, that starts on first down. That's where it has to happen. If they can be successful on a majority of the first downs in this game, I think the Bills have a chance. But it's a very tall task. This Ravens offense is very good. Cabby, I am not. I saw this one before. Are these guys picking the Ravens? I'm not picking the Ravens.
Stop assuming.
No, but this is also just a matchup preview, man. Like, I got to compliment what the other team does well. I'm lying to you all if I say the Ravens suck. They don't. They're the 3 seed. They're right below us, and they're extremely talented. And I'm not going to badmouth them just because they're a good team that beat us in week 4. They are extremely formidable, and they match up really well against us. So I'm gonna look at this, that to me, to win this, you just got to control them. And that starts on first down on defense. And that starts with the exploits you can have on offense that I listed. Mike, back to you. I apologize for ranting, but give me anything you got before we wrap it up.
You know what? I don't know if you're going to make a pick today. If you want me to, I'll make a pick.
No picks from me. No picks from me.
No picks for you. I'll say this too. The spread is very interesting right now. The Ravens are favored anywhere from a point to a point and a half. And I have this theory, and it's kind of been proven correct in recent years, that when you have a team that the public is very high on or feels like should be a decent sized favorite, but they're favored by between a point to 2.5 points, normally that team is going to lose the game. I've seen it a few times this year. My Bobcats in the MAC championship, I think they were 2-point underdogs against Miami, Ohio. Miami, Ohio beat them earlier in the season. Bobcats win. There was a UB game against Eastern Michigan where they were 2-point underdogs. They win. Minnesota the other day against LA, 2.5-point favorites on Monday Night Football against the Rams. The Rams win. Whenever you're a 2-point favorite or 1-point favorite and the people think that you are the team that should win, for whatever reason, those teams normally lose. And I think a big reason why is if you are a legitimate favorite in a game, you should be favored by at least 3 points. Because how often do you win a game by 1 or 2 points in the NFL? Probably not often. So
2 times a year.
Yeah. So if you're a 1.5-point favorite, 2-point favorite, you're basically saying this is a pick'em game. And I'm telling you this, the majority of America thinks that the Ravens are going to win this game. I'm just keeping it real. But normally when the narrative is one way, the reality is the other way. If the Ravens were a legitimate favorite, the way that the betting public thinks they are, they'd be favored by 3.5 points. They'd be favored by 4 points. And they aren't, which makes me think this is going to be a really tight game that's going to go down to the wire. And Sarah, I see some of your comments, and I understand where you're coming from with the Ravens losing to the 3-14 Raiders and the Browns and how they've looked ugly at times. You can't do the transitive property of you lost to the bad team. That means you're not that good of a team. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois lost to UB. UB is not better than Notre Dame. Unfortunately, sometimes in NFL you have crap games, crap results, and the Bills last year had a lot of that crap. They lost to the Patriots. They lost to a lot of crappy teams. They lost to the Jets. But the Bills weren't a crappy team because they lost to the 4-win Patriots and they lost to the crappy Jets. They just didn't show up, and there was bad matchups. The thing about the Ravens that are difficult for the Bills are that the Ravens are a horrible, horrible matchup for the Buffalo Bills. This game could be the Kansas City Chiefs right now, who just went 15-2 and realistically 16-1. And I would be speaking confidently because of how I think the Bills match up against the Chiefs. This could be Detroit, and I could be talking about with some confidence about how we really went to their house and got off to a great start against maybe the best team in football. What makes the Ravens so difficult is that their ceiling, they can play as good a football as anyone in the league. The reason why they're 12-5 is because they don't always do it. That's what should give the Bills fans hope, is that the Ravens don't always play to their A-plus caliber level of football. But when they do, they're nearly unbeatable, just like the Bills, when they play their A-plus level of football, are nearly unbeatable. But in the playoffs, you don't want to be playing teams that have that ceiling that is that high, because that means you have to match it when they're clicking. And the fact about the Ravens is we're talking about a team that is a power/finesse running team. They have the ability to power up the middle with Henry, but they also have the ability to finesse with Lamar. They have speed to the outside. They have speed with their playmakers. They have one of the best tight ends in the game in Mark Andrews, and they have a bruising offensive line. While the Bills run a nickel defense, that while good against the run for a nickel defense, will normally get abused on the ground against a team like the Ravens. So what has to happen in this game? The Bills either have to play at a higher level than what they are typically at defensively, or they're going to have to switch things up. As Joe and I have said in Erica and Cover One, they're probably not going to switch a ton up, which means we're going to have to hope that this defense plays one of their smartest, best games of the season. Now, that's just the defensive side of the ball. On offense, Josh Allen can go off against anybody. We can have a shootout. We can score against any team in the league, as we just witnessed this past weekend against Denver. I am not scared of the Baltimore defense. As Carl says here, they're allowing 244 yards per game, 31 in pass defense. The Bills should be able to score points. I am not overly concerned about the previous result where the Ravens killed the Bills. We had no Taron Johnson. There was no, I believe, no Bernard, correct, in that game. And then obviously Milano was out. Amari Cooper wasn't a Bill yet. Khalil Shakir got hurt. Wasn't the same when he returned. Taylor Rapp got hurt in that game. So the Bills were undermanned quite a bit. So I'm not going to take too much out of that game. But that game does serve as a warning of what the Ravens are capable of doing to us. They are capable of doing that, just like 2 years ago when Cincinnati, before the DeMar incident, was handling the Bills' defense on Monday night. That wasn't a mirage. That's what the Bengals were. And when they came to Buffalo a few weeks later, they handed it to the Bills. So I'll put it like this. I'm not going to make a pick because I don't want to say one way or another. This is a 50-50 coin flip game. Bills fans are going to pick the Bills. Ravens fans are going to pick the Ravens. Most of America is probably going to slant Ravens. The national media is going to slant Ravens. Vegas is slanting Ravens narrowly. It could go either way. This is where legacies are made. If the Bills beat the Ravens in the playoffs and go to the AFC Championship against Kansas City, Josh retakes that mantle of being one of the best of the best. He will one-up Lamar for the second time in the playoffs. Lamar can have his third MVP. Josh will take the 2 playoff wins. And the Bills will be in their best position to go to a Super Bowl since the 1990s, because I think they have a chance to go into Arrowhead, take down the Chiefs, and win it all. But
I feel like I need a cigarette after that.
This really is as close to 50-50 as 50-50 gets. Like, I don't even want to make a pick, Joe, because I can't. And I know some people are going to say, come on, Mike, like be a man. It could go either way. There really is no reason to say the Bills are better, the Ravens are better. These are 2 phenomenal teams. This feels like an AFC championship game, not an AFC divisional round.
Like I said, I feel like I need a cigarette after that. That was very therapeutic. And listen, a few things I'll address. First, Carl, thank you so much. I appreciate you immensely for the very kind super chat. And to reiterate Carl's question, or Carl's sentence and question, the Ravens are ranked number 31st in pass defense, allowing 244.1 yards per game. Can you speak to Josh Allen's arm exploding? This may be the key to victory. So, like I said earlier, the tight end matchup is the biggest one I'm looking out for. I would also like to point out Ravens by DVOA and their passing defense is ranked 8th in the NFL, and their EPA per play, at least on passing defense, is 10th. So they're still a very tough unit. They had a rough start of the year. They had a new DC take over after McDonald left. There was a lot of transition. I think they found their stride, and that unit right now is extremely, extremely stubborn, extremely difficult to fight against. But Mike, great points made, and I think it is a toss-up. It's a 50-50 game. And for me, I think that there is exploits that Josh Allen can make in this game. It's going to come down to him just being able to play a composed, calm game and not be under duress most of the game. And I think that is possible because this O-line has done really well in pass pro, specifically from their tackles. The interior scares me a little bit, and they do have some really good interior defensive linemen in Baltimore. So really, if you can maintain a pocket for Josh Allen and let him see it, even if the in-structure separation hasn't been consistently great, I do think he'll have the opportunity to, at the very least, extend plays with his legs like he could against Denver in the times where the coverage got to them. Moving on from this comment, though, yeah, this is a matchup preview. It would be disingenuous to just, again, sit here and tell you that we're going to roll the Ravens and blow them out, because I don't think that's the case. The Ravens are extremely good. And like you said, Mike, they match up so well against Buffalo. So it has to be called out that this is something you should be looking out for. It doesn't imply that we think the Ravens are just going to walk in there and blow them out. All possibilities. The Bills could do it. The Ravens could, whatever. But I do worry about these factors when I think of a playoff game in Buffalo against that Ravens offense that is extremely physical. The utilization of their fullback Ricard burned the Bills last time, and it could do it again. But with that being said, I'm also not blind to the fact that the Bills were injured in that last game, and that did change the foundation of their defense. And they did have numerous stops in the second half before the game got away from them because of the bad turnovers. So, like, these are all things that get added to this conversation. Not to say that I think the Bills are just going to go in there and die, but that this is what we should be looking out for. And there was a really, really good comment that I'm gonna pull up, because I just so glad that Paul mentioned this, which is Elianku was the DL I was talking about. If we need more size on the DL, he can play NFL games and make plays and do it inside out. I hope, Paul, that Ellie gets activated. I do. I want him there for run defense because he is a good run defender. I know I've had Anthony on the show a few times, and Anthony's made the comment about how he does it really well. He's just not big of a pass rush threat, and that's true. But maybe we could focus on the pass rush threats coming from the edges or for Ed Oliver, and let a guy like Ilianku maintain his integrity against double teams and be able to crowd the middle for a guy like Derrick Henry. And why I say this is because I watched the run defense against the Denver Broncos extensively. Please, he's probably a really awesome guy to talk to. He's a great vibes guy, and he's a good pass rushing D tackle. This is not a personal thing, but please, a different option on run defense than Jordan Phillips. I am begging you. It's just not working. It's not working. The double teams are getting to him. It is not consistently good, and it's creating massive problems when you talk about gap integrity. Thing that Ilianku, when you talk about rushing defense, I think does a better job at, and I would like to see him do this. Again, this is no disrespect to Jordan Phillips at all. Just watching the tape back and seeing the play, I think Ilianku has a chance to really fortify the depth and Bills run defense in this game, and Jordan Phillips can come in to have his reps, but also be more of a pass rush threat, which is what I think he's good at and has had success with in this Bills defense. Different roles for different scenarios, where now we can get the opportunity to put him in as where he could be strong and maybe create some noise against Lamar Jackson in the Ravens passing offense. I am very glad that Paul put this name here, because he deserves to get a shot to play. With the wonky year he had after having a really nice game against the Miami Dolphins, he deserves another shot, and I'm glad you bring it up. So those are really the points I made. As Roy says, don't worry, Joe, I'll have that cig for you. There you go, Roy. Have that cig for me, because I do not smoke. And it's, man, this is a game that I am, for as nervous as I am, I'm equally as excited for, Mike. I'm sitting here like it's the divisional round. When we talk about the conversations going into this season and where we are at now, it's definitely it's refreshing to at least say that they got to this point. I'm not satisfied with it. I want a Super Bowl. I want them to achieve more than just the divisional round. But the fact that we had concerns of like, what's their floor? Their floor maybe could be 9 wins. Oh no, are they going to be like a one and done in the playoffs? Is the transitional year going to bite them and look really rough and might affect their playoff hopes? We're right back to where we were last year, with an opportunity for redemption, and an opportunity for redemption in week 4 with a banged up Bills team that has a chance, despite the matchup concerns, to win in front of the home crowd and go to an AFC championship that they will either host or be against the Kansas City Chiefs again, for a matchup that you also would have to just be like, of course we're playing them again. So, Mike, any final thoughts from you before we wrap up tonight?
Yeah, I'm excited for this weekend. I can't wait to see how it all plays out. And I have seen some of the comments. We're not trying to take too much out of week 4 and project that onto this playoff game. I know there's a few comments about how we're taking too much about week 4 and not really caring about the Ravens and their losses. I don't care what the Ravens did week 4, September, October. I don't care what the Bills did September, October. The reason why the Ravens scare me is the reason why the Ravens have scared me for a long time. They have one of the best quarterbacks in football. And when you go up against one of the best quarterbacks in football, it's really hard to win. And when I look at this Baltimore team, they're having one of the best offensive DVOA seasons of all time. Their DVOA on offense has been off the charts. So think about how great the Bills' offense has been. The analytics and metrics say this Ravens offense is better. That should tell you something. That is scary. I'm a very numbers-based person. That scares me. Like, I'll be real, this Ravens team scares me more than any other team in the league. And that's why in early December, I was praying to God that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to win the AFC North. Don't understand why Bills fans were rooting against them at times. Because let's be real, if the Steelers had won the AFC North, the Bills would have had a cruise into the AFC Championship. They would have had a cakewalk. It would have been Denver and then possibly Pittsburgh or the Chargers or the Texans to get to KC. So I think the Bills can win. I think it's going to be a coin flip of if they win. If they bring it, they can do it. But we got to understand that this Ravens team, a lot of people think is the most talented team in the entire NFL. And as you just said, Joe, before the season, this was a transition year for the Bills. This was a year that many Bills fans were picking them to win under 10.5 games. They were picking the under, 10 wins, 9 wins. I don't know what you were at. I picked them to be the over. But this Bills team, while they have the ability to win it all, the reason why they are so great this year is that they know their identity and they play within themselves. This is not even close to being the most Bills talented team of the last 5 years. This might be the Bills' least talented team since 2019. And they went 13-4. Why? Because they have an unbelievable culture. They have a great head coach. They have an insane quarterback who finally learned after 7+ years in the league to play within himself, make the smart plays, not turn it over, has a complementary running game, and the defense holds on. And you know what? If you have to ask me where I'm leaning, because I'm going to wrap this up right now, and I know Spin's going to kill me without a prediction, I'm leaning to a Bills victory. I'm not going to predict it, but I'm leaning towards a Bills victory because that line is telling me something. Vegas is telling me something by that line. If it stays between -1 to -2.5 for the Ravens, I'll give the Bills a 60% chance of winning. That's all you're going to get from me. I'm done.
Oof, put a bow on it, stick a fork in him. He's done. Mike, great points. And I appreciate it. Yeah, guys, listen, this is going to be a fun game. I want everyone to enjoy it. I understand we've given the Ravens a lot of praise. They're a good team coming into our house, and we have to defend it. It's as simple as that. And this is a tough matchup, but it's not one that the Bills are guaranteed to lose. I think the Bills can absolutely take this game. I think Josh Allen could absolutely be as formidable as he's been in playoffs past. I think it just really boils down to those key factors we mentioned: first down defense, tight ends in the passing game, controlling the edges, things that you really have to do to somehow stymie the Baltimore team that you are about to face. And I understand, because I saw this comment and now I can't find it because of course this happens. It was something about, oh yeah, I'm saying you can't pick and choose which game results are predictive and which aren't. Can't say the week 4 win counts, but those losses don't. That's what I'm saying. Week 4, like, this is the thing. Like, they lost to the Raiders, they lost to the Browns, but at the end of the day, I still don't think, like, those are just regular season losses that can happen. The team went 12-5. They also had equally as dominant wins, and these were earlier in the year, especially the Raiders game, which was week 2, which is the embryonic part of your season. Like, to me, I don't think about those things when I talk about, like, the Ravens, because yeah, they were bad losses, but also, would you want people saying that same thing for the Bills in the divisional round when they lost to the Patriots earlier last year? It's irrelevant to the point because that's way earlier in the year and the team goes through changes. And that should breed some optimism for Bills fans talking about this matchup against the Ravens, because this isn't the same Bills team. That's a valid thing. They're healthier. Their personnel and offense changed a little bit. What they decide to lean on and their game plan for this game will change a little bit potentially based on the film that they got from the last game they played. So there's a real, very real possibility that the Bills go into this game and win it handily, or at the very least come away with a win. I won't give you a prediction, but I think there's reasons to be optimistic. And just because we compliment and favor the Ravens, it doesn't, or favor, I mean, just by the money line. But,
whoa, would that slip, Joe?
I know. I'm talking about the line and like favor the matchup. To me, I just don't think it's a coin flip, man. Like you called it. I can't give you anything right now as much as I'm hoping the Bills can get it done. And I hope they can overcome those matchups and control this game. But it's going to do it for us, guys. We're wrapping it up now. This was a really fun conversation, Mike Bundt. I appreciate you being here. I want you to tell these good people what you have going on and where they can find you.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff going on, guys. Obviously, Bills shows, Sabres stuff. You can ignore the Sabres stuff. They suck. But a lot of stuff going on with the Bills. You can find me at Trainwreck Sports and then at Mike_Bundt on Twitter. I have a lot of opinions. Some you'll like, some you won't. But I always love to discuss it and go back and forth. So don't ever be afraid of coming at me because I enjoy the conversation and I'm okay with when people have different opinions than me, which is the opposite of most of America at the current moment. So.
Yeah. Mike's great. Mike does great work. I've learned the most I have about Midwestern college football because of Mike Bundt. and he's just a pleasure to have on the show. You're awesome to talk to, Mike. I appreciate you. And it's just a matter of this game is going to be stressful, but we'll get through it together as Bills fans. I'm going to have a lot of fun watching it no matter what. For me, you can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. This is where I will be tweeting my thoughts on the game, also on Blue Sky as well. If you are a fan of the show or a fan of the network, feel free to drop a like, share it with your Bills fan friends or football fan friends. Subscribe to our network if you haven't already. And I didn't plug our One Pass, which is available for you to sign up for in the description below for just $60 a year. You could become an insider, and I cannot stress enough that One Pass membership is the lifeblood of our network. It allows us to have access to all of the resources that we use on a day-to-day basis to provide you with our video, live, and written content coming out from the network. So if you are interested, sign up for it in the description below. Give it a chance. $60 a year. It's well worth your time. A lot of our Discord members happen to hop in the chat tonight. I appreciate you guys. All of you in the chat tonight, everyone we engaged with, interacted with, you were all amazing. I truly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in this week, checking us out, contributing to the discussion. Whether we agree or disagree, we are going to have Spin did it. He did the thing where he throws me off my track. Maybe with the One Pass, we can get an actual prediction from Mike and Jones instead of just a feeling. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I can't be mad at that. He got me. He always gets me every week, but you guys are awesome. I love the interactions. This is a ton of fun. We'll be back next week with hopefully another optimistic, fun episode. I appreciate all of you so much for checking us out. Again, it's the best. And I will end this with this comment from Alex that says, if you want to be the best, you have to beat the best. This is the playoffs. This is the time to do it. Let's go prove the world wrong. Let's go have some fun. I appreciate you guys. I said that 100 times, but I really mean it. You all have a great rest of your night. And as always, go Bills. We'll see you soon.